Hey guys, it's Brigitte with San Diego Seed Company, and today I want to tell you everything I can possibly cram in this video about what you need to know to turn your yard into a garden. I'm sure you've been scrolling on Instagram, you've been seeing all these amazing photos of people's gardens. Well, you too can have a garden, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to convert a lawn or a front yard or a backyard space into a garden. But before I do that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you're notified anytime we put out a video. Okay, so let's hop into it. Now keep in mind, we're on my farm, and so the things I'm going to show you are going to be in a farm setting, but they're absolutely applicable to you, and I'm going to explain to you the background information or the thought process on why we do some of the things we do and how you can apply them to your garden space. Okay, so I'm standing on this ginormous piece of plastic. Now, why do I have this on the farm? Well, this area is going to become a field, hopefully this fall, and the first thing that we have to do before breaking into this field is we have to kill some of the really insane weeds that we have out here. This plastic is going to help solarize and suffocate a lot of the weeds that are growing. And also we watered very deeply beforehand, so it's gonna help germinate a lot of weed seeds that are sitting in the soil. They're gonna germinate, they're not gonna get any sunlight, they're going to die, they're going to rot, they're going to be eaten by insects. Those are all the things we want to happen because we have to take care of some of those weeds. Otherwise, if we were just to open up this field, dig into the ground, try to plant, I wouldn't be able to keep up with the weeds. So I have to take care of that first. Now, obviously, this is a ginormous piece of plastic, which I just learned, ginormous is not a word, apparently, says my videographer, but whatever. It's a word to me. This really big piece of plastic is way too big for most people in the backyard setting. But I'll give you an example. Here's a small piece of plastic. This is a piece of plastic that came actually in I think a box of something that I ordered. Didn't want to waste it. It's down on the ground. You can do this exact process. And the reason why is there's a ugly little patch of Bermuda there that I want to try to kill. Now, keep in mind that the process of solarization, which is what we're doing here, is not 1000% perfect. There's a lot of factors that play into it. First of all, you have to have really thick plastic. Ideally, it should be UV resistant plastic so it doesn't break down in the garden. And also you need to put this on during the hottest part of the year. So you'll see that we have plastic out right now because it's gonna sit in the garden and stay all the way until the fall, which means that we have all of June, July, August, and September for the heat to really bake the weeds that are in there. Now, this is the way we've done it on our farm setting. On our urban farm that's in San Diego, that location we actually used cardboard, which is another option you can use. Now, cardboard is not going to solarize and kill the weeds. All it really does is keep them at bay. Now, depending on how big your garden is, how bad your weeds are, that might be a perfectly good option for you to keep the weeds at bay so that you can get your gardening journey underway and not be totally overwhelmed right out the gate with too many weeds. The reason why I'm showing you this is because I want to give you information for the prep that you need to do before you start your garden. Regardless of whether or not you plant directly in the ground or if you use raised beds to grow your gardens, you need to think about how you're gonna manage the weeds so your whole gardening journey isn't about weeding all day, every day. That's not fun. When you become a gardener, it's because you wanna grow things, not spend your whole time weeding. So doing a little bit of prep work in the beginning to kind of control or manage those weeds is a really smart, it is a pro tip. It is something that you do when you've learned the hard way what not to do. So take the advice from me, do the work in the beginning, figure out a way to manage the weeds, whether or not it's cardboard to just keep them at bay, and then you put a lot of mulch on top. You can see here on the farm, we've added truckloads and truckloads and truckloads of mulch. That is because mulch will help me keep the weeds at bay. It holds in moisture, it builds microbiology in the soil. So if you can add mulch on top of your cardboard, that's a really good idea. The plastic is meant to be on the soil for only the hottest months of the year to solarize the weeds as best as it can. It is not 1000% solution, but it does help a lot. In an ideal world, what I would recommend you do is this summer, you solarize, try to get rid of Get rid of as many weeds as possible. Then you add thick layers of cardboard. Try to get sheets of cardboard that don't have a lot of, fold spots and spots for the weeds to come up. And then put a foot, 2 feet of mulch on top if you can. You will be amazed at how tidy your garden will look and how much easier it is for you to manage the weeds that do come up, because they will. So that's step number 1. Let's go look at step number 2. So once you've taken the steps to manage the weeds as best as you can, then you need to actually break ground. How do you break ground? So if you come over here, you can see that we've actually broken ground on this field, okay? Now, if you have a foot of mulch on the ground to keep the weeds away, you're obviously gonna have to move that mulch back to actually get to the soil. If you're going to do raised beds like wooden boxes, Birdie's boxes, anything like that, those can actually go right on top of the mulch, and then you fill them with really good soil. That's a little bit easier than planting directly in the soil. Obviously, this is a farm. We don't use raised beds. We grow directly in the soil. So we broke ground by pulling away the mulch, and we use obviously our tractor to do that. My back can't do that. But in your backyard setting, you would use a rake or a shovel, move everything back, and then you physically have to break into the soil. Now, I know the word till is like a bad word. It's like saying the F word. So bad. But on our farm, we have to do some tilling because it is a new farm, meaning that it sat vacant for 10 years. The soil has not been worked. We live in a very dry climate, and I have to be able to break the soil open to get moisture into the soil. If I were not to do that, if I simply were to just lay compost down on top of the soil, it would take years for that to naturally mix in. So there's a couple different options for you. One thing that you can do is you can do something called double digging. It's where you simply use your shovel and you're basically mixing in compost, manure, worm castings, all the things you need to develop your soil by mixing it in with your shovel. You're digging it in. It's a little more backbreaking, but if you have a small enough area, it's totally possible. Now here we've used a disc, which actually, as you can see, these lines, the disc comes in and it breaks open the soil. And what I really love about it is it allows me to get moisture into the soil at different levels. Whereas if I were to just till it when it's really dry, I'm pulverizing soil that already doesn't have a lot of organic matter in it. So after you take care of the weeds, the next thing you need to do is break open the soil. You need to physically, whether it's with a shovel or whether it's with some type of equipment, you got to break open the soil because you got to get moisture into the ground, you got to get fertilizer, you got to get compost, and you got to get manure. Those are the 3 things that really make a big difference on our farm and in our garden to develop really good soil. Bermuda-free horse manure is my favorite because it really holds in a lot of moisture. Compost, obviously essential. If you don't know a lot about compost, check out our video about compost. I go into all the details you need to know. And then you have to fertilize, especially in an area where there's very low fertility. If you don't know what the fertility is for your soil, you can get your soil tested. We have great soil testing kits sold on our website, and it'll tell you how much nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and all the things you need to know about your soil. So you break open the soil, you get fertility, you get compost, and you get moisture in. Moisture is the #1 thing that we're lacking in zone 9 and 10. We're a semi-arid climate, and if you were to simply just water on top of the soil, it takes forever for that moisture to get down 6 to 8 inches, which is what you want. The deeper you can get moisture into the soil, the longer it takes for the soil to dry out, and it will kickstart all the naturally occurring microbiology that's in your soil, because as we know, water is life. Just like we need water, the organisms that live in the soil need water as well to grow. So that's really important. So you can see here we came in, we use farm equipment. You can use a shovel, however you want to do it. Shovel, you can use a small tiller. You just want to break open the soil, and then I recommend watering deeply. Kickstart the microbiology in your soil by really getting moisture in the ground. Once you've done that, and you've weeded, and the soil looks something like this. Now we've added compost, which is incredible, and it doesn't really look like it, but there is compost in the soil. I would add more, At that point, you can build your beds. So let's jump over to the other field and I'm gonna show you what that looks like. Okay, so you've taken care of the weeds, you've watered deeply, you've added fertility, compost, manure, all the things that you need to in the soil. Then what do? Well, then at that point, you need to build your actual beds. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but if you see here, we have built simple beds that are raised, and the reason why we do that is so that I have a very clear, defined walkway in my garden. This is where I walk. I don't want to walk on the beds. It also allows for me to really keep on top of weeds because there's a clear, distinguished area where I plant and where I walk. Now, you don't have to do it this way. You can have very flat beds. There's many ways to garden. We like doing this so that I can keep weeds under control. Also, any excess moisture will fall down into these little walkways, will naturally get sucked up. It's not going to drain off into an area of the garden that I don't want it to. Keep in mind that weeds can only grow if there's moisture. So if you can keep weeds out of the garden and moisture out of areas that you don't want weeds to grow, then you can manage them a little bit better. These adorable little dwarf tomatoes, which look at this, look how cute, look how little they are, and they have a little mater on them, which hopefully will be available to our customers relatively soon. These dwarf tomatoes were planted a couple weeks ago in these raised beds. You can tell if you look at the soil that we've added additional compost on top. Look at the difference between that and say down here. Big difference, right? And another reason why I like this kind of built-up bed is compost is really expensive on a farm of this size when I need so much of it. So by having these raised beds, I really focus my manure, my compost, my worm castings, all of that in my raised bed and not on my walkway. I don't need fertility here because I don't want weeds to grow here. I want it all right here where the plants are growing. So that's another really important part of it. Now, something that's really important to remember as a gardener is it is a journey. And every year, just like a beautiful masterpiece, your garden is going to change, it's going to evolve, it's never gonna look the same year to year. So if you're a first-time gardener breaking into your front yard, getting rid of your lawn and putting in a garden, which congratulations, I'm proud of you for doing that, keep in mind that the first year may not look the best, but it will get better. Like fine wine, over time, it will continue to mature. You will notice things about your garden. You will make observations. Well, maybe my tomatoes will do better over here. Well, I have a really bad weed problem here, so I'm gonna move this patch over here. It's all a process, it's a journey. It is not a one-stop destination. So keep that in mind. No matter how you garden and build your garden the first year, it will get better. So let's just quickly review some of the biggest things that new gardeners forget about or don't realize are really important. Number one, first thing to think about is how are you going to manage the weeds? Whether you're going to solarize it, if you have sod, you might want to go in with a sod cutter and cut the sod out. That's an option. Whether you try to smother it with cardboard and mulch or dig it out physically, you need to do something to manage those weeds. That's really important or you'll be sorely disappointed in the long run. The next thing you do is you have to crack open the soil, whether that's by double digging or using a broad fork. You have to do something to get moisture 6 to 8 to 12 inches into the ground. That's really important. Then you have to mix in compost, manure, and some type of organic fertilizer. You have to do that by either physically mixing it with a shovel or tilling it. I know that's a bad word. Eventually our farm will become a no-till farm, but we can't now. It's too early in the stages of our soil development. But that's a whole nother thing. I won't get into that. You have to mix in the compost and the manure and the fertilizer so that your soil is in a good consistency, and also so that the microbiology that lives in the soil can really live and prosper because what grows in the soil is what's going to grow the plant. Your plants are only as good as the soil that you build. Lastly, you have to designate in your garden what is growing space and what is walking space, because you don't want to be walking on your growing space, and you want to have an area where you can keep weed free, and you can get, I would consider making it wide enough for a wheelbarrow. You know, you want to be able to get in. Those are the biggest things that people have to remember when they first build a garden. The last thing that I will add to that is your garden's only going to thrive if it has access to water. Whether that's you pulling a hose around the garden, whether it's installing irrigation, wherever you put your garden, make sure you have access to water so that you can keep your plants alive throughout the growing season. Now, if it is your first year growing a garden, tag us, let us know about it. I want to see on Instagram before and afters. I want to hear about your story. I want to be a part of your growing journey. So share it with us so that we can help you grow in any way possible.